What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. I have figured out that I haven't done a top 5 of best strength builds in Elden Ring. I've done dexterity builds, I've done intelligence builds, but never a top 5 strength build. So, considering the DLC is right around the corner, we're going to go ahead and jump into this video. These are going to be the top 5 best strength builds that I have made for the channel, and a few that I've been working on behind the scenes, so let's go ahead and jump right into it. So first and foremost, everything you're seeing in the majority of these recordings is recorded on New Game Plus 5. I am still level 150, so everything will be viable as you are seeing in the video. But we are using the 2 brick hammers, and the reason being is because they have an A scaling in strength, and they hit incredibly hard, doing a ton of stance and stagger damage. You have excellent physical damage, and with the Cragblade Ash of War added on top of this, you are going to break stances constantly. Every boss is going to crumble beneath you, and this has been one of my favorite strength builds to put together. You do have the ability to stack damage incredibly high with this, especially if you use the Commander Standard, which we have equipped, as well as the Blood Boil Aromatic or the Exalted Flesh. All of those are going to allow your damage to skyrocket, and you'll only need maybe 3 heavy charged R2s to do an absolutely decimating amount of damage, but you are going to break stances on 1 or 2 hits, which is incredible. The majority of my strength builds do focus around using stance breaks because they're just so easy to get, especially if you have a hard-hitting weapon. So as far as the actual build goes, obviously we're using the 2 brick hammers. We're also going to have Commander Standard equipped so we can get that Rallying Cry buff for extra damage. For armor, you can wear whatever you want. I'm just wearing this because I think it looks pretty cool. For talismans, we're going to be using the Great Jar's Arsenal so we can equip everything. We're also using the Rottenwing Sword Insignia for successive attacks, then the Axe Talisman for those heavy charged R2s, and also the Green Turtle Talisman for that extra stamina recovery. When it comes to your flask, you're going to use the Spike Cracked here and the Stone Barb Cracked here because these two are going to cause you to break stances incredibly easy, especially when stacked with the charged R2s. For stats, it's a very simple build. You have 60 Vigor, 21 Mind, Endurance is 33, and Strength is going to be 80. Now for this second strength build, I'm going to say it's possibly easier for you to break stances than the previous one. We are going to be using the Great Mace with the Cragblade on it to get that fantastic stamina and stance damage, but there is a summon that you can use to make your stance damage even higher with this build. Stormhawk Den is going to provide you with a fantastic buff that's going to buff the player's physical damage, stamina damage, and poise damage by 20% for 30 seconds. This is going to stack on top of Cragblade, making your stance breaks incredibly easy. I absolutely love the Great Mace. It has an S scaling in strength when you add a heavy affinity on it, and its physical damage is going to be almost unrivaled. I really enjoy how this build plays. The heavy charged R2s hit incredibly hard, and the talismans that we've added to this build make it synergize very well, allowing for a very simple playstyle, but also a very effective playstyle, allowing you to run through the lands between, destroying every single boss with ease. Now for the actual build, we're using the heavy Great Mace with Cragblade for those stance breaks. We're also going to be using whatever armor you want as long as it's over the 51 poise mark. For your talismans, you have the Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman for the damage negation, the Axe Talisman for heavy charged R2s, the Rottenwing Sword Insignia for the successive attacks because the Great Hammer moveset actually does have some pretty good successive attacks with it, and also the Green Turtle Talisman. Now for your flask, you're going to use the Spike Cracked here and the Stone Barb Cracked here for the heavy charged R2s and the extra stance breaks, and then for your summon, you can use Stormhawk Den, which is going to give you that awesome buff we talked about earlier. Now for the stats of the build, you want to have 63 Vigor, 21 Mind for Stormhawk Den, Endurance is 30, and Strength will be up at 80. Now for strength build number 3 here on the list, I wanted to use a tank build. I really enjoy the way that guard counters play, especially when used with a strength build. So we're going to be using the regular mace to break stances, do some good damage with guard counters, as well as boost our stats with Braggart's Roar in order for you to really be able to hide behind your shield, take minimal damage, and have a fun time in the lands between. We're going to be stacking damage around our critical strike, so we have some talismans that help us do that. And then also, per usual, this is going to really stack stance break damage because in my opinion, that's one of the easiest ways to play a strength build, and we need those broken stances in order to get off the most damage with this particular build. Now I will say, playing with a shield in Elden Ring is definitely, in my opinion, the easiest way to play through the entire game. Not only do you get great strength damage running a strength build, but when you have a massive wall of iron in front of you to hide behind, it really takes all the skill out of the game when you can just play around the guard counters. So in this particular build, we are going to be using the mace with Braggart's Roar, which is going to give us plus 10 physical physical damage and plus 10 damage negation for all types, as well as stamina recovery speed. And then we're also using the Crucible Horn Shield with Shield Bash on it. The armor is whatever you want to wear to get you over the 51 poise mark. And for your talismans, you'll have the Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman, the Roar Medallion, the Dagger Talisman, and the Curved Sword Talisman. For your flask, you can use the Spike Cracked Tear and the Stone Barb Cracked Tear. And if you want to use any buffs, obviously Blood Boil Aromatic and the Exalted Flesh will boost your physical damage. And lastly, for the stats of this build, it's going to be a level 150, Vigor 55, Mind is 20, Endurance is 36, and Strength is 80. So real quick, guys, per usual, I want to thank you so much for watching this far into the video. It does mean a lot. We have 2 builds left, but before we get into them, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and the bell notification if you're finding value in the content and the channel. It helps me out a ton. It's free for you guys, and I'm going to be pumping out a ton of new builds and Elden Ring content over the next year, so make sure to stay tuned for that. So let's go ahead and jump into the rest of the video. Now, the next build here on this list is the exact build that I'm taking into the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC. I have been working on this build for a while, and I think I finally have it down, and it does a ton of damage. Now, with that being said, this is also another Cragblade build that builds on breaking stances. However, it is going to be using the Warped Axe, which has an S scaling in strength and is one of the best weapons when it comes to strength in the entire game. It does a ton of physical damage. You are going to be bowling through every single boss in Elden Ring, and going into Shadow of the Erdtree, I feel like the one resistance that's not going to be a thing when it comes to that DLC is physical resistance. So this build does a ton of physical damage, and I can't wait for you guys to check it out. Now, what I really like about this build is the Warped Axe Heavy Charged R2 is a 3-part combo. The first Heavy Charged R2 press, you are going to hit one massive hit, and the second one is going to be an upswing and then another downswing to absolutely obliterate the stances and poise damage. This is incredible because no matter what happens, you're always going to break stances on 2 hits, which means you can get off a ton of criticals and you can whittle bosses down incredibly fast. Now, for the actual build, you're going to be using the Warped Axe with Cragblade and a heavy affinity to get you an S in strength scaling. You're also going to use whatever armor it takes for you to get over 51 poise. For the actual talismans, this is much more based on quality of life, but we have the Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman, the Erdtree's Favor +2, the Dagger Talisman, and the Axe Talisman. Now, for your flask, you're going to use the Spike Cracked Tear and the Stone Barb Cracked Tear, and if you do have extra faith for whatever reason, if you might be a little bit higher level than 150, you can use Flame Grant Me Strength and Golden Vow to pile on extra damage. Now, for the stats of the build, it'll be level 150 with Vigor at 50, Mind at 20, Endurance at 25, Strength at 80, and Faith is going to be at 24 for Flame Grant Me Strength and Golden Vow. So for our very last build, we're going to be utilizing the Golem's Halberd. This is an absolutely phenomenal strength weapon, having an A scaling in strength, and you're also going to do an incredible amount of physical damage. With this build, we're going to utilize some jump attacks. We're also going to be using an Ash of War that I don't think is used a lot, and personally, I really like it. I've seen this weapon used a lot with Royal Knight's Resolve, but in my personal opinion, I feel that is a very boring way to play. You may do a ton of damage, but having to buff up between every single hit just seems very boring to me. So this build is going to utilize the Stamp Upward Cut Ash of War, as well as the Raptor's Black Feathers for jump attack damage and the Claw Talisman in order to put together a really fun combination and playstyle that's going to allow you to pull off a lot of damage while at the same time having a variety of different strategies you can use in order to take down your enemy. The majority of your enemies are going to fly straight up in the air after the Stamp Upward Cut Ash of War goes off, which means you can either use a heavy charged R2 or get another jump attack off to do a lot more damage. Typically with this strategy, you are going to break stances very, very quickly, and even when we're not using the Axe Talisman or the heavy charged attack tier, you're still going to break stances in 2 hits. Now for the build, you're going to be using the Golem's Heavy Halberd, which is going to give you an A scaling in strength and an incredible amount of physical damage, as well as Stamp Upward Cut. For your armor, anything that's going to get you over that 51 poise mark is recommended, and then for your talismans, you're going to use the Shard of Alexander, the Great Jar's Arsenal, the Viridian Amber Medallion +1, and then the Claw Talisman for your jump attacks. Also, make sure for your armor, you do have on the Raptor's Black Feathers, so you can get more jump attack damage. For your Flask of Wondrous Physic, you're going to use the Green Burst Crystal Tier for your stamina recovery speed, as well as the Stone Barb Crack Tier, making stance break easier on your enemies. And for your stats, you're going to have 60 Vigor, 19 Mind, 30 Endurance, 80 Strength, and 14 Dexterity, so you can wield the Golem's Halberd, and everything else is untouched. And guys, there we have it. We finally added top 5 strength builds to our repertoire of top 5 videos, so I hope you guys enjoyed it. Leave down in the comments your favorite strength build and the build potentially that you're going to take into the Elden Ring DLC, Shadow of the Erdtree. With that being said, guys, I'm going to leave a ton of videos here on the screen for you, just so you can check out some more of my content if you want to. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell notification on your way out. And until next time, stay safe, enjoy the game, and I'll see you in the next one.